There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shaw talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
A lot of confusion on the Dems' part. That's the good news. I want to tell you that the first one I'm going to quote from, I never watch him. I don't like him. But he's part of the dissension on the Democrat side, so I'm going to talk about him a little bit. That's Van Jones. Yeah, CNN analysis, Van Jones appears to recognize a political head-on collision before it even happens. He's now warning leftist viewers to wake up to the realities of what can occur with Trump's next run for the White House. This, according to his appearance on a panel in the aftermath of the president's State of the Union speech. One of the most worrisome moments for Van Jones was the president's pitch for improved education for Afro-Americans. You may not like it, he cautioned, but he mentioned HBCU, that's the historically black colleges and universities. That, they've been struggling, he noted, for a long time. A bunch of them have gone out of business. But Trump threw him a lifeline in real life, in his budget. The lifeline struck fear in Van Jones because he recognized it was the start of a political consequential policies now being enacted by the Trump administration. While his CNN colleagues snickered at Trump's showmanship, Van Jones focused on what was the most notable aspect of putting Afro-Americans front and center at the State of the Union message. Trump is pushing back against the Democratic narrative of portraying him and his supporters as white supremacists. The timing could not have been better. Wake up, folks, Van Jones tweeted. The Iowa caucus was a debacle, followed by the State of the Union address laying out Trump's strategy to win. In an act of pure showmanship, President Trump matched up real faces to his policies, these policies that addressed real inequities in American life, and the nation was watching. I've also noted that our president is going after some of Sanders' supporters, particularly if the Democrats steal the election. I was trying to look for a proper word there for a family network. If Sanders goes down because of foul play on the part of the Democrats, it upsets a lot of Sanders supporters. Last time, a lot of them voted for Trump because they knew the election was stolen. It looks like they're trying to steal it again, and Trump is playing on that. God bless him. I'm glad to see it happen. And I'm glad to see the dissension that we have with the Democrats. More from Van Jones. He says that the Dems' fantasy football politics have failed them. He said they've not only wasted 3 years of going after Donald Trump, their fantasy football politics have strengthened Trump and left the party without a candidate to replace him. That's a quote from CNN's Van Jones. Again, a liberal that I don't often quote. I would accuse my party at this point of having engaged in 3 years of fantasy football politics. Jones said this on Unfiltered a week ago, a CNN program. Quoting Van Jones, where we said, don't worry, Trump is never going to be seated because the Electoral College will not seat him. He said, do you remember that? Then we said, don't worry, Bob Mueller is going to take him out of the White House in handcuffs. Remember that? He said, don't worry, that's what they told us. He's going to be impeached and removed. None of that. 3 years of all that fantasy football has come to fruition, Jones lamented. Trump is still in the White House, and we still don't have a candidate. And the way we developed our issues may or may not even serve us. Had we spent the past 3 years accepting reality that a bunch of people who voted for Obama twice voted for Trump, it's hard to call them a pack of Nazis. If we'd listened to them in addition to our own constituencies and figured out what they needed, we might be in a position to have Trump on the run, he noted, but we don't. A quote from Van Jones, the reality is, all the blood, sweat, and tears over impeachment, Bob Mueller, all that kind of stuff has done nothing except to dent Trump. Hasn't done a thing. Trump is actually higher in the polls than he's ever been. And we still don't have a candidate, referring to the Dems. And then one other one that I don't watch and I don't quote, but I saw where Chris Matthews has faced reality. He noted, as he ripped into Bernie and tortured socialism, saying it doesn't work. CSNBC host Chris Matthews, a liberal, tore into Bernie Sanders' far-left proposal ahead of the New Hampshire primary this past week, saying socialism simply doesn't work when put into practice. The Democratic Party has to figure out its ideology. He noted that a lot of us will be sorting things out if the Democrats run a socialist candidate. I have my own view on socialism, a quote from Chris Matthews. That goes back to the 1950s. I remember the Cold War. I believe if the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in New York Central Park, and certain other people would be there cheering. Chris Matthews, he noted, he went off about the dangers of socialism. He was referring to Bernie, the pure evil of communism, he noted, the legitimate fears of a Red Scare in the Cold War. And now there could have been executions in Central Park if they had have won. Chris Matthews was laying it down. Socialism is an issue in this campaign, he noted. He doesn't like socialism, and he said it doesn't blankety blank work. The issue of this campaign is socialism. Some people like it. Those of us like me who grew up in the Cold War, a lot of us don't. I've seen what socialism is like. I don't like it. It's not only not free, it doesn't blank work. A quote from Chris Matthews. Now, somebody I do often listen to and do sometimes quote, Lindsey Graham, senator down in New Hampshire, noted before the New Hampshire primary, you're seeing the demise of the Democrat Party. It's socialism versus liberalism for 2020. A quote from Lindsey Graham. He claimed on America's Newsroom a week ago that the demise of the Democratic Party is underway as voters head to the polls in New Hampshire, their first in the nation primary. Lindsey Graham noted the president's in a spot where he really can't lose as this plays out. Former Vice President Joe Biden is likely going to win South Carolina. You're going to have 3 different winners if he does, 3 different winners in the first 3 states. On Super Tuesday, he noted, I think billionaire and former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg is going to make a real dent. He's going to make a real presence, he continued. You're going to go to the convention with Biden basically collapsed. Somebody's going to fill that slot. It's not going to be Democrat Amy from Wisconsin. It's going to be Bloomberg or Hillary, I note, or Michelle Obama, I suggest. In fact, today, the day I'm doing this program, I see where Drudge has something where he's alleging that Bloomberg is going to announce that Hillary will be his running mate. A Bloomberg-Hillary Clinton ticket. I think it could be formidable too, folks. Anyway, getting back to Graham's quote, he went on to say that if the 2020 Democrat National Convention in July comes around, and if you can't find a nomination on the first round of voting, the Democratic Party, as we know, it's going to be completely imploding. He noted if a nomination isn't determined after the first round of voting, it's going to help re-elect Donald Trump. I think that's true, folks. And I think that if you get a brokered convention, and if it isn't Bloomberg, it could be Hillary. And now today, it's rumored a Bloomberg-Hillary ticket. Or, as I warned and would be afraid to see happen, their nomination of Michelle Obama. Anyway, getting back to Lindsey Graham, he said, you're seeing the demise of the Democratic Party. That's the party that your grandmother and grandfather knew. And we'll see how that affects America. Bernie Sanders, the populist senator who's making his second straight White House run, is in the driver's seat right now. He's sitting atop the final public opinion polls, drawing large and larger energetic crowds in the closing days, and arguably the largest grassroots get-out-the-vote operation in New Hampshire. That proved true. And I also see today where Vice President Biden, thinking that South Carolina was going to be his firewall, he's losing a lot of the black support down there. Personally, I think you're going to see less and less of Biden. I think he's toast. The majority in the new poll says they would not vote socialist. This is from Gallup. A majority of Americans surveyed in a new poll said they'd not vote for a socialist candidate for president, with the most opposition, of course, coming from Republican voters. Asked whether they'd vote for their party nominee, who was a generally well-qualified person for president who happened to be a socialist, just 45% said yes and 53% said no. That according to a recently released Gallup poll. The acceptance for a socialist nominee is at 2% lower in a recent poll than when Gallup asked the same question in June of 2015. Now that we see that Sanders has won New Hampshire, but remember this, he only got 25% of the vote up there. Of the total vote, the socialist only got 25%. The situation could play out in November election with Trump and his allies already slamming the Democrats as socialists. Sanders, a leading candidate in the race, has openly described himself as a Democratic socialist. But the Dems have seen this. Majority of them, as I mentioned, don't think that they want him up there, that he's going to get it, that he can beat Trump, and they're going to steal the election, just like they did away from him, and give it to Hillary again. Is that right? Could be. By the way, back to New Hampshire in the Republican vote, Trump doubles Obama's 2012 total in New Hampshire. That shows his base is kind of fired up. President Trump didn't have a serious challenger in the New Hampshire primary, but he still turned out enough votes to more than double former Barack Obama's 2012 vote total in that state. This indicated to most that the Republican base is all in on Trump as he prepares to face the eventual Democrat nominee in a re-election battle this November. With 87% of precincts reporting, Trump had secured more than 120,000 votes in New Hampshire. In 2012, Obama managed to get just slightly over 49,000 total votes in New Hampshire. Trump 120,000, Obama 49,000. This dwarfs the total of other incumbent presidents. Then President George Bush received almost 54,000 in the largely uncontested GOP primary in New Hampshire back in 2004. In 1996, incumbent President Clinton received 76,000 votes in New Hampshire. Again, folks, Trump received 120,000. That tells you his people are fired up. He did have token opposition, as he'll have here in North Carolina, but they've managed to stir the bushes, so to speak. Even Bill Maher, and again one I don't like, noted that Trump has had his best week ever. A week ago Sunday, he came out with this, and the TV host, Bill Maher, said, President Donald Trump had the best week ever. I thought it was his best week. He said this a week ago Sunday on a CNN interview. And the most depressing week for me, as someone who is not a fan of Donald Trump and what he's doing in this country, it was depressing to me, Bill Maher noted. I don't know how we get from here this week and November 3rd. He doesn't think it's favorable. The most depressing thing about this week, at his best moment, the Democrats just looked like the gang who couldn't shoot straight or couldn't run straight. If they can't get their act together soon, it's going to be over before it begins, he concluded. He said that the State of the Union address was effective for Trump because he stuck to the teleprompter. If you watch the State of the Union, it was very effective, Morris said later, and the showmanship pulled out every stop with the medals and the Marine being reunited. I mean, that's what he does, and he's going to be hard to beat. Trump being acquitted was the worst possible outcome for his critics. The worst thing that could possibly have happened, that we all feared and talked about, has happened, and he's normalized. Anything you see enough becomes normal. You don't notice it. Murrah concluded Trump is in a great position. And a relating article from Brian Zundep, he noted that the week when Trump was reelected, he noted that Santa Claus was kind of late coming to the White House chimney, but this past week of reelection Christmas presents, although coming belatedly, arrived under the Trump Christmas tree. Face it, Christmas was a downer for President Trump and his supporters, he noted. The House rammed through 2 articles of impeachment and promptly skipped town, much like kids leaving a flaming bag of dog poop at someone's front door before running away. There was uncertainty over how long this would drag out, whether there'd be witnesses and an ultimate vote for acquittal. There was concern that a last-minute witness would appear like Julia Switnick at the Kavanaugh hearing. Somebody accusing Trump of participating in a rape train or something. Yeah, they can say all kinds of things happened during his phone call with the Ukraine president. Well, last week's festival started with Republican strategist Rick Wilson and sidekick stooge Don Lemon on CNN calling 63 million Trump supporters credulous boomer rubes and laughing uproariously over their cleverness. And his strategy, it was brilliant, but not in the intended way. What did it do? It energized the Trump base by insulting them. Then came the Iowa caucuses, the party that wants to nationalize and run health care. They want to nationalize and run energy. They can't even count 170,000 votes in a relatively small state and provide prompt results. What's the Democrat enthusiasm against the reprobate Trump? In 2008, 240,000 turned out to caucus for the Democrats. This time, only 170,000. That's right, Iowa. 2008, 240. This time, 170. Was this incompetence? Well, if it was, then the Democrats should be put in charge of, I guess, but, right now they can't run anything larger than a yard sale, and they've shown it. If it was deliberate, they're trying to screw Bernie Sanders out of the nomination again. I mentioned that. Yeah. The Des Moines Register scrapped their pre-caucus poll for sketchy reasons, raising suspicions it reflected a Bernie surge. Their establishment can't have that. They can't have their 2020 hope pick on a hardcore socialist, the guy that honeymooned in Russia and recently suffered a heart attack. If the DNC tries to steal the election from Bernie again, expect fireworks. Aside from literally taking it on the streets, expect many to stay home, vote for Trump, or even form a third party. And that could really split the Democrat voting, assuring a second Trump term. Next was the Democrats' impeachment acquittal. No witnesses, no conviction, despite the efforts of Pierre Delecto, also known as Mitt Romney. He kind of had his inner channel with John McCain, I think, although only as an empty gesture, of course. Then giving the middle finger to Trump and his supporters will end his viability as a Republican, but ensure frequent appearances is a wise statement on CNN and MSNBC. He made a good bed. Let him sleep in it. Impeachment is an unintended consequence, torpedoed Joe Biden's candidacy. It brought into national discussion the Biden family pattern of corruption. The Treasury Department just handed over documents to several GOP Senate committee chairmen assisting their probe into Hunter Biden, Burisma, and a web of graft. Democrats impeached Trump for simply asking questions about this corruption. It didn't go over great, did it? The Democrats' establishment electable mainstream candidate is circling the drain with a fourth-place finish in Iowa, and upcoming investigations throwing another anchor around Sleepy Joe's neck. Democrats, rather than addressing the problem that they were elected to fix, problems that go from immigration and drug prices to infrastructure and health care, they're doubling down, planning on even holding more hearings, looking for any reason to file additional articles on impeachment. Well, good luck for running for re-election on nothing more than the orange man bad. Doesn't seem to be working out too good, does it, Nancy? I want to toss this in. Little lightheartedness. We need it, don't we, folks? Tim Allen on Trump. Whatever your feelings for Trump, these are some interesting points that Tim Allen makes. Put your hatred aside a minute and think about these observations. Here's some interesting points to think about prior to 2020, especially to my friends on the fence like moderate Democrats, libertarians, independents, and the never-Trump Republicans, and those thinking of walking away from the Democrat Party. Think about it. Women are upset at Trump's naughty words, but women also bought 80 million copies of 50 Shades of Grey. Not one feminist has defended Sarah Sanders. It seems women's rights only matter if those women are liberal. And no border walls, no voter ID laws. Did you figure it out yet? But wait, there's more. And I like this. Chelsea Clinton got out of college and got a job at NBC. They're paying her $900,000 a year. Yet her mother flies around the country, first class, speaking out about white privilege. And just like that, they went went from being accused against foreign interference in our election to allowing non-citizens to vote in our elections. Big switch, wasn't it? President Trump's wall will cost less than Obamacare website. Think about it. His wall costs less than the Obamacare website. Let it sink in. And with one election away from open borders, socialism, gun confiscation, and full-term abortion nationally, folks, we are fighting evil. And the Dems sent more troops and armaments to arrest Roger Stone than they sent to defend Benghazi. 60 years ago, Venezuela was the fourth on the World Economic Freedom Index. Today, they're 179th, and their citizens are dying of starvation. In only 10 years, Venezuela was destroyed by democratic socialism. And what's the Democrats' current frontrunner? By his own admission, a Democrat socialist. Russia donated zero to the Trump campaign. Russia donated over $140 million to the Clinton Foundation. But Trump was the one investigated. And Nancy Pelosi invited aliens to the State of the Union. That's right. And President Trump invited victims of aliens to the State of the Union message. Let that sink in. And you know, a socialist is basically a communist who doesn't have the power to take everything from their citizens at gunpoint. Yet. And let me ask you this. How do you walk 3,000 miles across Mexico without food or support and show up at the border 100 pounds overweight with a cell phone? And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants to ban cars. She wants to ban planes, give out universal income, and thinks socialism works. And she calls Donald Trump crazy. Bill Clinton paid $850,000 to Paula Jones. That was to get her to go away. I don't remember the FBI raiding his lawyer's office. Did you? The same media that told me Hillary Clinton had a 95% chance of winning now tells me Trump's approval ratings are low. And the problem with socialism is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money. A quote from Margaret Thatcher. And Maxine Walters, she opposes voter ID laws. She thinks they're racist. But you need to have a photo ID to attend her town hall meetings. And get this, President Trump said, they're not after me, folks. They're after you. I'm just in their way. God bless him. God bless our president. Sometimes it hurts to think. I think if only 11 million people have Obamacare, how will 24 million people die if it's repealed? Will an additional 13 members be randomly shot? I was thinking if Donald Trump deleted all of his emails, wiped his server with bleach bit, and destroyed all of his phones with a hammer, would the mainstream media suddenly lose all interest in the story and declare him innocent? And I was thinking if women do the same job for less money, why do companies hire men to do the same job for more money? I was thinking if each ISIS attack now allegedly is a reaction to Trump's policies, but all ISIS attacks during Obama's term were due to climate control and a plea for jobs. Wow. Doesn't make sense, does it? And I was thinking we ought to stop calling them all entitlements. Welfare, food stamps, WIC. They're not entitlements. They're tax-funded handouts and shouldn't be called entitlements at all. Social Security, veterans benefits, those are entitlements because the people receiving them are entitled to them. You know why? Because they were earned and paid for by the recipients. The others were not. And I was thinking if liberals don't believe in biological gender, why do they march for women's rights? And I was thinking, how do the Russians get Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the DNC to steal the primary from Bernie Sanders? I was thinking, why is it the Dems think superdelegates are fine, but they have a problem with the Electoral College? And I was thinking, if you don't want the FBI involved in elections, don't nominate someone who's being investigated by the FBI. And I was thinking, if Hillary's speeches cost $250,000 an hour, how come no one shows up for her free ones? I was thinking, this was the best, If Democrats don't want foreigners involved in our elections, why do they think it's all right for illegals to vote? A positive attitude won't solve all your problems, but it's going to annoy enough people to make it a worthwhile effort. Once again, folks, I want to remind you, if you did not get my suggestion on the upcoming primary election in North Carolina, have your pen handy next time. I'll go back over the results again, Lord willing. In the meantime, ain't it great to have Donald Trump in the White House? Aren't you happy, isn't Hillary? And after looking at the clowns out there, all those confused clowns, I don't think we got that much of a problem. We need Donald Trump again. Let's make it a matter of our prayers to hold him up before God. He needs our prayers for his physical protection, for advice on those around him, for sanity, for the preservation of our republic. Goodbye until next week.